Okay, everybody, welcome back. This is the final presentation of the day. We've got a half day today. I wonder if our next speaker is online and can hear us. Randy, can you hear us at all? And can we see you?
Good morning.
Hey, Randy, good to see you. So our next speaker is a former WMU graduate, Randy Terry Bumbury. Randy was at the university during the COVID pandemic year of 2020 to 2021, and went through possibly the most difficult year ever at WMU. But despite that, he did a wonderful piece of research back in his... Oh, somebody got a mic on? We okay? I think we're good to go again. Okay, so Randy did a really wonderful piece of research for his dissertation, in which he focused on, again, the small-scale artisanal fleet of Guyana. And he took a very much a social science approach, almost psychological approach, to try to understand the reasons behind the lack of reporting in this fishery. So Randy is returned last year to the Ministry of Agricultural Fisheries and Fisheries Department in Guyana, and has been quite heavily involved in a lot of the work they're doing in Guyana on the Port State Measures Agreement, as well as various other related work. So Randy, very pleased to see you again, and very much sorry that you can't be with us. And welcome back to WMU, if albeit in the same old virtual world that we got very used to a year ago. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So just as I'm about to present, as usual, it's rain in Guyana, so the rain began falling. So I'm going to speak a bit loud so that the interpreters can hear me, as well as those within WMU. Sorry that I couldn't be there to present. Would have loved to have those informal chats. So before starting, once again, my name is Randy Terry Bumbury. I'm a fisheries officer within the Ministry of Agriculture Fisheries Department and an alumni of the Royal Maritime University. So it's an honor to actually be able to present with such an esteemed panel. And I'm happy to also see students presenting their great work on what they've done for dissertation, and I know how difficult that can be, and great job to everyone. So this morning I want to speak on, my presentation will be on the unreported. It's a title, basically a glimpse of Guyana's small scale artisanal fishery. And what I was looking at is that there's been a heavy focus in terms of IUU, in terms of the illegal aspects, mainly the unregulated aspects as well for activities happening in the high seas, and the small scale fisheries where there's some aspects of it that's normally missing, which would come from in terms of data collection. So this morning, I would like to present the basic outline of what I'm going to be presenting, looking at IUU fishing, but not really going back into what has been said before, because I think the presenters before me would have been very concise and very clear in the way they probably presented IUU fishing in terms of understanding it. Look at Guyana's marine fisheries, IUU fishing index for Guyana, the scale of the problem, the importance of data collection system, reporting in the small scale artisanal fishery, look into policy and regulations, fishers' behavior, relationship of actors in small scale fisheries, a kind of case study with regards to the barriers and the motivations of reporting, and also what can help. Now, IUU fishing is an intriguing topic similar to spider's web to me. And given that there are many moving parts, they do not operate in isolation at times. However, it's important to state for a state to identify which aspects of IAU fishing they are addressing. The concept of IAU fishing emerged out of concerns related to the industrial fishing fleets operating in high seas, in particular longline toothfish fishery in the Antarctic Ocean within the CAMLAR framework, which is the Commission of the for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. So what needs to be beared in mind is laws and regulations to combat IUU actually continue to be rolled out at actually the risk of the small scale fisheries. And in saying so, IUU, as you can see on this slide, is it's a very complex system. There are many versions of it. When you're looking at it, you can be considering that a vessel might be misreporting in a particular area. A vessel might be considered to be illegal within your exclusive economic zone. A vessel might be fishing between two countries, traversing into the regional fishery management organization's area. They may not have a flag. They might be transshipment. And there are some common forms that are known for IUU fishing, and as listed here, some include fishing without a license, exceeding your quota, targeting undersized fish or endangered species, use of banned gear, repackaging of illegal catch, contrary to the label with the name of the legal vessel. Now, one of the things that I found interesting about this particular note from the researcher is there's hardly much in consideration for that unreported aspect that comes out in terms of, I would say, from the small scale fisheries, because the small scale fisheries are extremely large and extremely important in what it provides to the global stakeholders. Now, IUU fishing remains, as I said, it's extremely complex, and it's important for us to, when looking at solutions, we must be able to ensure that there's a harmonization, or also there's a multifaceted approach. Now, in general, IUU fishing, it has a negative impact on our marine environment and biodiversity. And with that, it comes in terms of diminishing our stocks, which is, as I said, one of the most important resources to the world right now, as it's providing in Guyana what we would say a relatively cheap source of protein, so that all Guyanese would be able to utilize the products and have access to protein. Also, we ensure that it's shared with the world through our exports. So it's important that there is a balance in maintaining the particular works that are actually the fishing community. It actually prevents restoration, and the impact on the global community from not just fishing, but other threats. There's like a cumulative pressure on our fishing, on our marine resources, and whether it be the actual environment or the overall species that are around, it's important that we keep on pressing to get more information out as to how we can better protect and come back to restore the environment. For example, I know trawling would have some impacts on your seabed, and that can also lead back to further adverse impacts. So if persons are allowed to, like, for example, fish with impunity, that impact over time would seem to diminish our all of our efforts that we're going to ensure that the fishing sector is good. And that comes back to the point of, undermining long-term sustainability and productivity, as well as presents a risk to our global food security. And these are something that is extremely important, because as a father, I would like for my son to be able to have enjoyed fish and other fisheries product the way I am enjoying it at current state, and my grandkids and further along the line as well. So Guyana is actually a South American country, but we're also considered a Caribbean state as well. And we're actually in, I would say, right in a sweet spot on the border, as we're near to the Caribbean large marine ecosystem, as well. We are a part of the North Brazilian Shelf large marine ecosystem. So being in that sweet spot, it often presents a unique position for the Guyanese, as well as others within the North Brazilian Shelf larger marine ecosystem, as the abundance of fish sea is, or variety of species that could be found in the area is actually quite good. And given that the runoff from the various rivers, such as our own rivers, the Marara, Siquirbo, Berbice, as well as the Venezuelan Vista Orinoco and the Amazon Vista in Brazil, that creates a unique ecosystem. So being there, we're now in what you consider the Guyana belt, or the Guyana Shield, sorry. And that there, as I said, has a very unique fishery within that area. So for our marine fishery, there are actually, there were 5 categories, but there are 4. Whereas a consideration of our industrial fleet, which consists of trawlers for sea bob, which is a jumbo shrimp, and there's also prawn. The sea bob trawler is actually fishing in a particular zone. So when it comes to being regulated, the industrial fleet has the most regulations in place, where they would have vessel monitoring systems on board, where they would also, as I said, they have to fish in a particular area. They have turtle excluder devices on board, cameras on board, and occasionally observers would go out with them. So this is one of the most regulated fishery in Guyana. Also, given that it's Marine Stewardship Council certified, the CBOB that is, it's important that we continue this on in terms of being able to implement more strategies to reduce the impact of the fishery on the environment. Additionally, there's the semi-industrial fleet, which consists of red snapper vessels, a foreign fleet, which this one must be clarified in terms of their Venezuelan vessels that are hired by companies in Guyana to also fish red snapper. The difference is that with these particular vessels, they are required to, I would say, use a different method. So they use the line, and the Guyanese vessels, red snapper vessels, use the traps. So I think it's a limited amount of license that are provided, and it's like on a short-term basis. So coming into the small-scale artisanal fisheries, this fishery, the overall fishery in Guyana, should have stated before, is about approximately plus 1,400 vessels. And within that, the artisanal fisheries is about 1,315 vessels. And that's based on account from 2017. And there are different categories within the small-scale artisanal fisheries, some of which I've highlighted. The Chinese are Fixing. These are more inshores and near to the coastline, in the sense that they're stationary and they utilize what is called a fish pen to do their catch. There are cabin cruisers, also inboard vessels, which are much larger. They're about, I would say about 15 to 17 meters, as well as the Bumbury boats, which are about, I would say about 12, or maybe 5 to 12 meters in length. Now, each of these vessels have a unique approach to fishing. A majority of the fishing is done by drifting, but there are also cadel vessels, which also use hand lines. So, and each of these vessels that are utilized if you go to Suriname, they'll basically call them the Guyana boat, because of the design. Now, given such a large fleet, you would expect that the country may have some issues in terms of being able to regulate this particular industry, given that Guyana has a lot of mangroves, and within some of those mangroves, there are a lot of sites that arise, and changes to the environment would tend to create a shift from a person fishing in one location or utilizing one mooring site to go utilize another. So these are some of the challenges that we would have to compete with, especially um, given there have been some significant changes to Guyana's marine environment from the coastline. And this will have to do with siltation. So having that particular area clogged up with a lot of silt makes it hard for some of the vessels to traverse. So they would actually have to look for a new mooring area. Then that can create a buildup in a particular location. Now, in terms of the IAU Fishing Index, what this does is it provides a score of your country. The closer you are to 1 is good. If you're at 5, that's bad. So Guyana's, I would say, in the middle at the precise moment, 2.5. We're going to be working to probably get that better score, but it means that we're measured against what we're doing as a coastal state, a flag state, and a port state. And so far, in terms of port state aspect, we've been able to, I guess this is based on the fact that Guyana has ratified the port state, acceded to the port state measures agreement in 2016, and as such taken a few measures to become more compliant and be able to implement the port state measures. So this here is just a brief overview for you to see what the actual score for Guyana is. And this is readily available on the IAU Fishing Excellence Index website. So if for other countries would want to know their score, they can also check there and see what can be done to modify it, because I think the information that's assessed is publicly available information. So this comes back to now transparency issue. Is what we're putting out enough to be able to be scored on these particular indices? Because I know there's for Guyana or fishery department, most of our information would flow through FAO, but I think the more needs to be done from a national perspective to get more information out as to what's being done and from a Guyanese perspective as well. So, as I mentioned, one of the key reasons why I chose this particular picture is because this is one of our main wharves, our landing sites. It's the Meadowbank Wharf. It's actually near my office, and there are a large amount of vessels that would land there. And it's actually a mix of the industrial, semi-industrial, and artisanal near one particular location. So as I stated, Guyana's fishery consists of approximately about 5,000 plus fishers and over 1,500 operable vessels. There's a large dependency on data for us from processors, as the data produced can at times be underreported from a small scale perspective and are sometimes misreported. And I'll go more into these as we progress. It's actually, when it comes to illicit trade and IUU fishing, this is one of the most interesting. It's kind of difficult to address this because sorry about that. Because the activities actually, they happen without cooperation or any form of resources. So what tends to happen is, for example, things like cocaine or marijuana, those may actually be slipping through the cracks, and small scale fishing vessels may be used. Some of the tales that you would hear from fishermen about vessels maneuvering through the waters is actually harrowing, and they know out there, like the back of their hand, so they can identify strange vessels. And that's why, getting information from them and having a sort of balanced relationship is also important. Limited data. Now, actually, that's very interesting. Limiting data comes in a perspective where that makes it hard to manage. If you don't have enough data, if you're not sure what's going on out there, you're not sure of the number of persons in the water, you're not sure of the number of I would say catch that's being brought in is accurately reporting, or not close to accurate in some cases, it would it results in poor decision making. And that's something that we're trying to, limit within the fishery sector. We're trying to The precautionary principle is always important to apply, but it's also important to know that you must understand what you have, how you're going to use it, and when you're going to use it. Um, with regards to their monitoring, control, and surveillance activity being limited, that comes from a perspective of there not being enough, I would say, resources, both human resources and as well as our physical resources, like for example, vessels. So the fisheries department would have to depend heavily on the Coast Guard to utilize their vessels to go out, which they are also limited in the distances that they can go with the particular vessels that they would have. So these are all some of the problems that you would face in general from Guyana with regards to the IAU aspects. Now, why I say data is important, that paucity of data can actually lead to uncertainty about our stocks, which may compromise and threaten the economic food security of users dependent upon that stock and increase the chances of overfishing. Reporting from the fisheries is of significant importance as it, supplies us managers with the necessary data to improve aspects of decision making and for general sustainability. Now, looking at the data decision making for fishery science, you want to collect your data, you want to ensure you assess your stocks, you want to give science advice, you want fisheries management decisions involved. But how many countries can actually say that they apply this process in such a rigorous way? How many of our stocks are actually assessed? When I come back to this, stocks are being assessed. For example, in Guyana, our CBOB stock has been assessed twice, whereas our artisanal stock has in terms of being assessed, a length-based assessment was done in about 2017-18 regarding 3 particular species, and that was only based on whatever data we would have available with regards to length. So there would have been a lack of data in terms of the sex, the maturity, and for instance, compilation of data in terms of what the environment would have been like in a certain period, and getting now scientific advice about this particular information has to now lean back mainly on the precautionary approach, because you don't want to be in a position where you're assuming that what you're doing is correct and there are much more heavy implications for the decisions that we'll be making. So data collection systems they have a flow in terms of what the status quo normally is from I would say large scale to small scale aspects, which you have the commercial fishers, you have the data being collected, you have your logbooks, you put them in logbooks. If not, you send your staff out to go to collect the data whilst there, and there's a flow. Someone has to manually input this data. It moves from electronic data. It's supposed to be sent to a scientific body, or is it? So these are some of the questions you'll be asking yourself. Do we actually follow all of these steps? Now, data is actually an essential tool to the FAO as it is used to conduct global, regional assessments for providing relevant information on agricultural fisheries and nutrition. And, regarding the fisheries time series data, it actually helps in terms of protecting the resource availability for current and future use. Bringing about the need for accuracy from comparative collection. Stock assessments, for instance, are important components of management which rely on quality and good quantity of information. And that's very interesting now. What actually is a good quantity of information? And how do you determine if a quality is best based on the data collection methods applied with the resources available to one? And one of the things I found that researching demonstrates good management in fishery requires use of quality data. By falling short, the lack of data or reliable data can affect implementation of management decisions. So, are we collecting enough data, or is it accurate enough? A key challenge of the small scale artisanal fisheries fishers, do they report accurately or not? And if they are reporting or not reporting, what is keeping them from reporting or not reporting? So these are, when you consider it in the context of a small scale fishery, uh, being one of the most important fisheries in the world, and the focus, I think, is always big money. So you're going to go to where you're looking in terms of what can bring in that revenue. So the focus will move now to shift, for example, your industrial fishery, like for example, Guyana. Whereas the fishery that you would say is providing that support for the locals, the fishery that's providing the majority of the world with access to cheap, and again, I say cheap protein, a cheap source of protein. The emphasis or focus is sometimes in terms of management becomes limited, and then you're not allowing yourself to clearly look at how it is that you can help this particular industry grow, and then what needs to be done to help them help themselves. Now, the reason why I'm showing these particular graphs, it's a part of my actual research in terms of the fisheries production within Guyana, as well in terms of the data that's actually collected. So over, I would say 2002 to about 2020, it's basically showing you the graph on the right, sorry, is basically demonstrating data being collected by the fisheries department over time. And on the left, it's our actual production data. Now, this particular data being collected shows that there's actually an increase in collection of data by the fisheries department as we've progressed over the years. And it continues to be, hopefully will be an upward tick to get more data and get more fisheries reporting. But what should be done and how it should be done is something that the fisheries department has been having large discussions on to decide how it is to improve data collection and how it is you want to improve your relationship between the department and the fishers. So reporting is one of the most, for me, basic form of compliance. Within our licensing system, there are conditions set out. And one of that conditions, though unwritten, it's basically stated you must report, which is why we provide logbooks to the fishers. And with the logbooks being provided to the fishers, they are required to give information. If an officer approaches them, they're required to give information. However, considering the importance of the fishing activities and fisheries economics, the quality of knowledge that we have is extremely crucial, the accuracy. But a key word here is the trust among the fishing communities and scientists and managers. So trust must be there for them to want to give you this information. Trust must be there for you to now go and request this particular information. But you don't want to have such a trust that you're only collecting data from one person or a group of persons only. You want to ensure that you're sampling such a wide group of individuals that you're getting enough to basically paint a picture of what's actually going on in your fishery. So as I was stating, you're required by a license to get to do reporting. It's basic standard, I guess, worldwide. It's one of the most basic form of compliance. So with that, we come to the policies that Guyana and regulations that Guyana would have in place. So our overarching, I would say, Bible is the 2002 Fisheries Act. This basically sets out Guyana's principle for how we're gonna take fisheries management forward, focusing on protection of the environment. But it also, this particular act utilizes more of a precautionary approach and work should be done in the future to ensure that there's a multifaceted approach for the act in terms of developing so that the ecosystem approach to fisheries is included as well. Now, Article 20 of the Fisheries Act, it says that every fisherman is subject to a special condition on landing, on landing the catch and gathering information on the vessel's operation. So this is basic for collecting that particular data that you would need. So under the licensing situation, persons are required to share their information. We've since tried to strengthen the Fisheries Act by producing a General Fisheries Regulation for 2018. This year, we've established a Marine Mammal Protection Regulation, a Fisheries Product Regulation, and we've also have several management plans in place. Now, when it comes to these management plan, I'll get a bit further in terms of, what is important in terms of developing them and how it was done. For example, our artisanal fishery has a strategic framework and management plan. We have a marine fisheries management plan, which the current management plan will expire at the 31st of this month. So I would say as of last week, the minister would have signed off on the Marine Fisheries Management Plan 2002 to 2027, as well as the Marine Fisheries Management Plan 2022 to 2027. Though they're running for what I would consider a 5-year period because 2022 is basically over. These plans are going to be a bit more adaptive in their ability, whereas they respond more to the current pressures or situations that are within the industry. So there will be an annex which allows for updating or modifications of the particular plan to address certain issues that would have arisen that was not taken into consideration within the plan for the particular period, so that it can be addressed within that 2 or 3 year framework. So do we understand the behavior of fishers? Very simple question. No, it's important that from a policy perspective, fishery managers often rely on the imposition of strict sanctions, relatively intensive monitoring and control programs to increase the cost of illegal behavior, and thus try to deter it. However, while it can be successful in the fisheries with sufficient resources to support high levels of surveillance and effective systems from imposing penalties, many fisheries actually lack the resources requisite governance structures to successfully deter illegal fishing. Well, other types of governance structures or systems, such as customary marine tenure and co-management, rely on mechanisms such as norms, trust, and perceived legitimacy of regulations for compliance. More generally, the absence or social psychological factors that encourage compliance in any fishery can undermine the efficacy of an otherwise effective and actually well-designed fisheries management system. A fisher's belief influence their approach to compliance. For example, some fishers express concern of sharing their data would give away their fishing grounds, while others believe it would result in increased taxes. When you actually consider this, fishers, their beliefs are extremely strong. Some fishers have experience you would consider 20, 30, 40, their entire lives. From the age of 6, all they would probably know is fishing. Go to their father sometime on the boat, they come back in, they take 1 or 2 trips, they develop knowledge, they develop an understanding of the fishing grounds, and over time, those beliefs and their perceptions, they become strong. You have a look, especially when you're thinking about the self-interest of a person, that is also extremely strong, because I would say from the perspective of trying to gain more at less risk, we push. And as long as the risk is low, this is something that's been resonating within this past week of discussion, low risk, high reward. Why not? And if the industrials or large scale fisheries can do it, it's definitely going to be done in the small scale perspective. Who has less, I would say, enforcement or management being placed upon them, but some actually use discretion and try to more in. So it's important to take, for example, psychology and the behavior of fishers in context, because understanding these maybe can help us in terms of putting forward a bit more, I would say, adaptive, multifaceted approaches. And that's what one of the key things I would say I've learned at WMU is that there's just not one way to tackle an issue. As a scientist, sometimes or as a fisheries officer, I have to put on a legal brain. I have to also put on a social scientific brain, and I also have to apply the sciences. So it's important that we look at everything from that particular perspective, in my view. Thank you. So now, based on the research that I would have done in terms of my dissertation, I focused on 5 particular actors in terms of how I would say data is actually shared, and who are these actors who actually present data that come in from a perspective of that are actually used for fisheries management. And this is from clearly the perspective of the fisheries, the regulating body, as well as its key stakeholders of the fisher. So the interactions here, now I must put a caveat and say that NGOs also collect data, but they have a different approach to collecting data as compared to fisheries department, which is why the focus here would be on these particular 5 actors. Now, in terms of these particular actors, there's an ebb and flow of when the fish is caught, who gets what particular data at what particular time. If you've noticed, there's an interaction that flows between the fisheries department, cooperatives, and exporters, but there's none with the fisheries department and a middle person. There's a fisher who shares their information all around. Within this, there develops now a sort of, I would say, you call this an informal business setting, especially when it comes to the fishers, because they deal with the cooperatives, they deal with the processors, but someone that's not even at times focused on, they actually deal with middle individuals who collect this particular data in probably what we could consider as our canters or van, and they sell them to different locations. Like, for example, they sell them to the exporters. They buy from fishers as well, and sometimes they and when they buy from the fishers, they sell them to the exporters, or they sell them to local markets as well. So it's like a complex web of where this data is flowing. And a lot of the times, most persons that the fisheries department do not interact with actually interact with this middle person. So within my I would say the research that was being done, we're only able to interview one middle person, and that middle person was actually a woman. And her influence, as she was explaining, and the power that she would have delivered in terms of pricing, it could dictate what the fisher will go out and actually do, and how much to catch and how much to bring back at a time. So if what they come in with is not adequate, they're gonna seek out a means of getting more to provide their suppliers, just to provide the person they're supplying the fish to with that particular pricing, because they also control the price. If one person's price is a bit too low, or they're not gonna go too high actually in terms of, or low in terms of buying, they're gonna go to someone else. So they try to keep that sweet spot with the fishers. Now, everything in terms of the relationship, in terms of getting data, the fisheries and the cooperatives, data is flowing to the cooperatives, data is flowing to the processor, data is flowing to the middle person. There are gaps there that the fishery department won't be able to get. For example, once it flows to the middle person, that data is gone. As long as there's no information or anyone to record it, that data is gone. once it flows to the cooperatives, some cooperatives actually have data there that nothing has been done with because the department has not stepped in to gain access to this particular data to conduct the requisite research that would be required. And it's a case where we've got this one fisheries cooperative, which is very active, the number 66 cooperative. They collect a lot of data and they're much interested in terms of applying sciences to fisheries and ensuring that fishers are able to benefit. So they would want this data to be managed. So the communication now between the entities seems to be a bit stray. So as you can see, in terms of this informal business structure, it's very complex as to what's going where, when, and by whom. So within this study, I wanted to, improve the fishers' participation and their awareness. So in order to understand how to improve the fisheries or awareness in terms of fisheries management, I also wanted to see how it is to motivate them to report. But in order to motivate, you actually have to understand what a barrier is. So in this context, I would have been applying was considered community-based social marketing. Now, the aspect of this is you want to, you want to identify a behavior or a barrier that you want to change. You develop a strategy or tool, you pilot a strategy, you evaluate, and you rinse and you repeat. Now, for this entire community-based social marketing aspect, I focus mainly on the first point for this particular research, which means there's still a way to go and more work will be done with regards to the other three aspects. So it's key to understand, when we're promoting a more sustainable future, it is essential to know how to encourage individuals to adopt these activities that will collectively promote sustainability. This kind of marketing emphasizes the personal contact among the community members and the removal of barriers, those roadblocks to sustainable actions and sustainable behaviors. Now, research basically suggests that approaches are often likely to bring about behavioral change. And this kind of marketing emphasizes direct personal contact among community members for the removal of these barriers. Now, to promote these activities to sustainable barriers, these activities can be first identified. And community-based social marketers therefore begin by conducting research, and that will help in terms of identifying the barriers unusual for the research to uncover multiple barriers that are quite specific to the activity that's actually being promoted. Now, within the research that was actually conducted, several themes are actually identified in terms of not just the barriers, but also the motivations, their awareness, and their participation. But you've realized that there's no a mix here, because within participation, a barrier for communication seems to be a part of awareness. It's a part of their participation, yeah, but there's also a barrier in terms of communication. So how is it now? Can we look at this and what's really happening here? So as I said, they're all interconnected. To be able to find a motivator, you got to see which aspect of your communication is really hampering the process, because fishers want information. Their stocks are dwindling. Why is my stock dwindling? If I don't have information, I'm going to assume that it is X, but there might be other reasons there, and lack of communication from A to B. It fosters a sort of, over time, mistrust, a lack of understanding, and then that makes it a little more, I would say, complicated. So when you start to consider trust is big. Trust is something that once broken, it takes time to mend. And this is something that we've identified. It's going to take some time to mend because over a particular period, fishers' trust have dwindled in the department. But it might not just be that the fishers that don't trust the department. It might actually be a case where the persons who are collecting this information also don't trust what's coming through with regards to the information. Now, what we found is in terms of motivating, there must be opportunity. You can't stay just have someone in, you want them to do the right thing, but you're not putting out any sort of opportunities for them to be able to grow, for them to be able to take part in. One of the considerations that with the research we've been able to find is that fishers actually want to also achieve, the artisanal fishers want to achieve Marine Stewardship Council certification. How are they going to get there? Several are on board, others may not be interested. So it's now, it comes to a buy-in, and the entire trust process must be considered. So at current, and I'm going to go back to the management plan, one of the ways that we, after recognizing that over the years, we've developed these plans and there have been consultations, but there hasn't been a direct influence or engagement by enough artisanal fishers, so to speak, to be able to say that they want this or they need this being in the plan, they need this to be addressed. So what we did was earlier this year, we went out to the fishers to, present the plan, but also present situations where they could put a piece of themselves in the plan and have their solutions to problems that they would have seen added. And that seems to have helped in terms of some aspects of the relationship. So this also now again helps with our communication, the processes, that these barriers that we have. But one that's extremely hard, we come back to those beliefs. So it's now important for us to, deconstruct what has been done in the past, look back at it, and then develop some strategies that is going to help addressing in terms of slowly transitioning those beliefs from what is to what can be. And participation, when you're looking at that, we basically just want our fishers to report accurately so that we can ensure that they benefit from it. And with that being said, it's important to focus a lot on how it is we interact with the fishers, how it is they perceive data. So we've got to be out there more. We've got to be communicating a bit better. We've got to be sharing as much information, having them a part of the management for decision-making process so that they feel involved, so that they know that they are the ones who are contributing to the management of their livelihoods. So this is just a little excerpt of what came about from some of what the fishers would say. So this is actually something that a fisheries officer would have said, and then something a fisher would have said. And if you look there, trust seems to be the issue. Again, because clearly, from the fisheries perspective, you go out to collect some data and you're told we've got 10 pounds of fish. And then when due to your observations, you look out and you see, wow, it's actually 120 pounds of fish. Okay. So you can't really write down 10 pounds because you're clearly seeing 120 based on the measurements that would be within the particular holes or baskets that it would use. And then from a fisher's perspective, they're not getting enough. They're not feeling protected. They're feeling like the less they know from the fisheries department, their interests are not being covered, and we should just go protect ourselves and form our own association. And these are the realities of what's going to be happening. And it makes it now challenging for you to perceive if it is that you're not addressing the real issues that are coming out. So I want to know what can help, and these are some of the things that I feel are extremely important. We must have increased awareness of participation, which is linked to everything, and everything should be linked to everything. Because if you're looking again at it in isolation, you're not really addressing the issue. Everything in fisheries needs to be transparent. Co-management from our artisanal fisheries perspective, as would have been highlighted by my colleague earlier, is extremely important. Financial support, there were talks of subsidies, but what type of financial support is necessary? And when you come here from financial support, is the financial community aware of IAU fishing? And are they aware of what needs to be done to safeguard against IAU fishing, but also to promote much more sustainable practices by those involved? Cooperation and political will is key. If there's no political will when addressing, for example, IUU, all of your efforts are going to just kind of drift away. And it's important for us to focus on how to address these. So what's in the pipeline for Guyana at the moment? We've got a national plan of action that is currently being developed. We have our port state measures regulations that's being developed. And with regards to the national plan of action, there is an emphasis on looking into the behaviors of our fishers. So with that being an integral part of it, it's ensuring that we're applying various aspects or various methods or disciplines to be able to address IUU fishing. We've got a port state measures working group that's should be activated by the end of November. A memorandum of understanding, which will have various agencies, including the Fisheries Department, the Coast Guard, the Marine Police, our Guyana Revenue Authority, and other agencies. And these are all key stakeholders in terms of addressing the PSMA aspect, but we're also going to have this more of a hybrid approach in terms of looking at it not only from a port state aspect, but also a coastal aspect, because we want to utilize these resources in the best way we have available. We're going to be starting a project, a 4-year project with FAO with regards to the ecosystem approach to small scale fisheries. And this is extremely important in terms of the regulation that we're going to be developing along the line. And the importance of protecting our oceans can never be overstated. There's no such thing as an insignificant form of research that can be done or in any particular area. Any little information that can help improve sustainability is extremely important. We need to ensure that all of our stakeholders, including women, are involved in addressing key issues within the fishery sector or the global marine space as well. So with that, I would like to just say thank you for your time. Hope it wasn't too long, and questions. I would also like to say, one of the persons that would have been instrumental in me choosing community-based social marketing would be the late Professor Meinhard. Working with him and Professor Neat would have been very good for me in terms of understanding how to apply the social science to the scientific and using a mixed method going forward. So I just wanted to say thanks to all the professors at the World Maritime University, especially within the Ocean Sustainability, Governance and Management. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Randy. Very nice to hear the wider picture of what's happening in Guyana in the context of your own particular research there.